If someone can ruin your mood in seconds, they control your life. But today, you take that control back. And once you see this, no one will ever get inside your head the same way again. If you're ready to stop reacting and start controlling your life, type control in the comments right now. Make that decision real. Emotional control is often misunderstood as shutting feelings down, but it's actually about owning them without letting them own you. When you suppress emotions, they don't disappear. They build pressure beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to leak out through anger, anxiety, or overreaction. Real control looks different. It means you allow yourself to feel everything fully, but you don't immediately act on those feelings. You create space between the emotion and your response, and in that space, you decide who you want to be. Think of emotions as signals, not commands. Anger might signal that a boundary was crossed. Anxiety might signal uncertainty or lack of control. Hurt might signal unmet expectations. When you treat emotions as instructions, you react impulsively. But when you treat them as information, you gain clarity. That shift alone changes everything. You stop being a passenger in your own life and become the driver. Self-ownership means you stop blaming others for how you feel. It's easy to say, they made me angry, or they ruined my mood, but that mindset quietly hands over your power. The truth is, people can influence your emotions, but they don't control them unless you allow it. When you accept that your response is your responsibility, you step into a level of control most people never reach. This doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect or ignore problems. It means you respond with intention instead of reacting out of habit. You choose calm over chaos, clarity over confusion, and strength over impulse. You don't deny the emotion, you direct it. Over time, this builds emotional stability. Situations that once triggered you start to lose their grip. You become harder to shake, not because you feel less, but because you've trained yourself to handle what you feel. And that's the real power, being deeply aware, fully present, and completely in charge of how you show up, no matter what's happening around you. Triggers are not random. They are patterns pointing to something unresolved within you. When a small comment, a certain tone, or someone's behavior creates a strong emotional reaction, it's rarely just about that moment. It's connected to a deeper meaning your mind has already assigned based on past experiences, beliefs, or insecurities. That's why two people can face the same situation and react completely differently. One shrugs it off, the other feels attacked. The difference isn't the situation, it's what it touches internally. A trigger is like a spotlight. It reveals where you still feel vulnerable, where your sense of control is weak, or where your expectations don't match reality. If someone ignoring you makes you feel disrespected, it may reflect a deeper need for validation. If criticism hits harder than it should, it might be tied to self-doubt you haven't addressed. The reaction is immediate, but the root has been there for a long time. Most people try to avoid triggers or blame others for causing them, but avoidance keeps you stuck, and blame gives your power away. Growth happens when you get curious instead of defensive. Instead of asking, why did they do that? Shift to, why did that affect me this much? That question changes your focus from the outside world to your inner world, where real control exists. When you start identifying your triggers, you begin to separate the present moment from past emotional weight. You realize that not every reaction is justified by the current situation. This awareness creates distance. It slows you down just enough to choose a different response instead of repeating the same emotional pattern. Over time, triggers lose their intensity, not because people stop doing things, but because those actions no longer hook into something unresolved inside you. You become less reactive, more grounded, and harder to manipulate. The same situations that once controlled your mood start to feel smaller, almost irrelevant. And that's when you know you're gaining control. Not by changing others, but by understanding yourself at a deeper level. Most reactions happen too fast to notice. Something happens, and within a split second, you've already responded, raised your voice, shut down, sent the message, or made the expression. It feels automatic, almost like you had no choice. But there is a moment in between, a brief pause that most people skip over. That pause is where your power lives. When you react instantly, you're operating on habit, not intention. Your brain pulls from past patterns, emotional memory, and instinct. It's efficient, but it's not always accurate. It doesn't ask whether this situation truly deserves that level of response. It just fires. That's why people often regret what they say in the heat of the moment. They didn't choose that reaction. They defaulted to it. The pause interrupts that pattern. It slows everything down just enough for you to see what's actually happening. Instead of being pulled into the emotion, you observe it. You notice the rise in tension, the urge to respond, the thoughts forming in your mind. And in that awareness, you gain control, because now you're not just reacting, you're deciding. This doesn't mean you become passive or silent. It means your response becomes deliberate. You can still speak, still act, still set boundaries, but from a place of clarity instead of impulse. That difference is everything. A reaction fueled by emotion often escalates a situation. A response guided by awareness can de-escalate it or end it entirely. The pause can be as simple as taking a breath, counting for a few seconds, or choosing to say nothing right away. It may feel uncomfortable at first because you're resisting the urge to release the emotion instantly, but that discomfort is a sign you're breaking an old pattern. Over time, that small pause becomes a habit, and as it grows, your reactions become fewer, your responses become stronger, and your emotional control becomes more consistent. Situations that once controlled you begin to lose their urgency, and you stop being someone who reacts to everything and start becoming someone who chooses carefully how and when to respond. Not every opinion deserves your energy, but most people live as if every opinion demands a response. Someone says something negative, dismissive, or critical, and it immediately feels personal. The instinct is to defend, correct, or prove them wrong. But the moment you do that, you've already invested your time, your focus, and your emotional state into something that may not deserve it. Opinions are everywhere, and most of them are shaped by limited information, personal bias, or someone's current mood. When you treat every opinion as important, you allow other people's perspectives, no matter how uninformed or irrelevant, to influence how you feel about yourself. That's how your emotional state becomes unstable, constantly shifting based on who said what. Emotional strength comes from discernment, not reaction. It's the ability to step back and ask whether this opinion has any real value in your life. Does it come from someone who understands you, respects you, or has insight worth considering? Or is it coming from someone projecting their own frustrations, insecurities, or assumptions? Most of the time, it's the latter. When you stop giving weight to every voice, you create mental space. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you. You don't chase approval from those who are committed to misunderstanding you, and you don't let passing comments define your sense of worth. This doesn't mean you ignore all feedback. Constructive input from the right people can help you grow, but there's a difference between feedback that builds you and opinions that distract you. Learning that difference protects your focus and your peace. The key is realizing that attention is a form of currency. Every time you engage, react, or dwell on someone's opinion, you're spending that currency, and if you spend it on everything, you'll have nothing left for what actually matters. When you become selective, something shifts. You stop reacting to noise and start focusing on what aligns with your values. Opinions lose their emotional grip, and your sense of self becomes less dependent on external validation and more rooted in internal clarity. Boundaries are not about controlling other people. They are about defining what you will and will not allow in your space, your time, and your emotional life. Without them, you become accessible to everyone and everything, which means your peace is constantly at risk. People will take what you don't protect, not always out of malice, but often out of habit, convenience, or lack of awareness. If you never draw a line, they won't know where it is. Many people struggle with boundaries because they confuse them with rejection or conflict. Saying no feels uncomfortable. Speaking up feels risky. There's a fear of disappointing others, being misunderstood, or damaging relationships. So instead, they stay silent, tolerate what bothers them, and slowly build resentment. That resentment doesn't come from others, it comes from ignoring your own limits. A boundary is a clear decision followed by consistent action. It can be as simple as not engaging in conversations that drain you, not responding immediately to every message, or choosing to walk away from disrespect instead of arguing with it. The power of a boundary isn't in what you say, it's in what you consistently enforce. When your actions match your limits, people begin to adjust. Protecting your peace means you stop over-explaining your decisions. You don't need long justifications for choosing what's best for you. The more you explain, the more you invite negotiation. A simple, calm response is often enough. Those who respect you will understand. Those who don't will reveal exactly why the boundary was necessary. At first, setting boundaries may feel uncomfortable, even unnatural. People who are used to your availability might push back. They may question you, test you, or react negatively. But that reaction is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that the dynamic is changing. Over time, boundaries create stability. You feel less overwhelmed, less reactive, and more in control of your environment. Your energy is no longer scattered across things that drain you. Instead, it's directed toward what matters, and your emotional state becomes something you protect with intention rather than something others can easily disturb. Detachment is often mistaken for coldness, but in reality, it's emotional independence. It doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop clinging. You stop tying your inner state to things you can't control, like other people's opinions, actions, or approval. When you're attached, your mood rises and falls based on what's happening around you. When you're detached, your stability comes from within. Attachment creates pressure. You expect certain outcomes, certain responses, certain behaviors from others, and when those expectations aren't met, frustration, disappointment, or anger follows. You start trying to control situations or people to feel okay again. That's where emotional exhaustion begins. Detachment removes that pressure. You still have preferences, but you're no longer dependent on them. You allow things to unfold without forcing them to match your expectations. This shift changes how you experience conflict. Instead of taking everything personally, you start to see people's behavior as a reflection of them, not you. Someone's negativity, inconsistency, or disrespect no longer defines your worth or dictates your reaction. You recognize that their actions come from their mindset, their habits, and their unresolved issues. That awareness creates distance, and in that distance, you find calm. Detachment also strengthens your decision-making. When you're overly attached, emotions cloud your judgment. You hold on to situations longer than you should, chase people who aren't aligned with you, or tolerate behavior that goes against your values. Detachment clears that fog. It allows you to step back and see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. From that clarity, your choices become more aligned with your long-term well-being. It's important to understand that detachment is not avoidance. You're not ignoring problems or shutting people out. You're engaging without losing yourself in the process. You can care deeply, invest effort, and show up fully while still maintaining control over your emotional state. Over time, detachment creates resilience. Situations that once overwhelmed you begin to feel manageable. You become less reactive, more grounded, and more selective about where you invest your energy. And instead of being pulled in every direction by external forces, you remain steady, focused, and in control of how you respond regardless of what's happening around you. You teach people how to treat you through what you tolerate, what you accept, and what you consistently allow. Every interaction sends a signal. When you ignore disrespect, laugh off hurtful behavior, or stay silent when something crosses your line, you're not keeping the peace, you're setting a standard, and that standard tells others, this is okay with me. Most people won't stop on their own because there's nothing showing them they need to. This isn't about blaming yourself for how others act. People are responsible for their behavior, but your response determines whether that behavior continues in your life. If someone interrupts you constantly and you never address it, they assume it's acceptable. If someone speaks to you with a lack of respect and you continue engaging as usual, they learn that there are no consequences for crossing that line. Over time, these patterns become the norm. Consistency is what reinforces the lesson. One moment of standing up for yourself isn't enough if it's followed by multiple moments of backing down. Mixed signals create confusion, and confusion invites repetition. When your words and actions align over time, the message becomes clear. People either adjust their behavior or they create distance themselves. Either way, the dynamic changes. The way you carry yourself also plays a role. Tone, body language, and presence communicate more than words alone. When you speak calmly, maintain composure, and don't over-explain, it signals confidence and self-respect. When you chase, plead, or try too hard to be understood, it signals uncertainty. People respond to that energy, often without even realizing it. There will be discomfort in changing this pattern, especially if others are used to a more passive version of you. They may test your limits or question your change. That reaction is not a reason to step back. It's a sign that the old dynamic is being challenged. As you become more intentional with what you allow, your environment begins to shift. The people who respect your boundaries stay and adjust. The ones who don't gradually fall away. And in that process, you build relationships that reflect your standards rather than ones that take advantage of your silence. Inner stability is the foundation of emotional freedom. It's the ability to remain steady regardless of what's happening around you. Most people's moods swing like a pendulum, rising and falling based on compliments, criticism, success, failure, or the unpredictable behavior of others. When you rely on external circumstances for your emotional state, you hand over control of your life to forces you cannot manage. True stability comes from cultivating a center within yourself that is independent of these fluctuations. Developing inner stability begins with awareness. You notice when your emotions are being hijacked by someone else's words, actions, or even silent judgment. That recognition alone creates a small gap between stimulus and response, giving you the chance to respond intentionally rather than react impulsively. Over time, that gap widens, and you start to see situations clearly rather than through the lens of your triggers or insecurities. It also requires practice in managing your thoughts. Emotions are closely linked to the stories we tell ourselves about the events we experience. If someone criticizes you, you can choose to interpret it as an attack, or you can observe it as feedback that may or may not be relevant. Choosing your interpretation is choosing your reaction, and repeated practice strengthens your resilience. The more you exercise this skill, the less external circumstances control how you feel. Another aspect of inner stability is prioritizing your values over others' opinions. When your sense of self is anchored in your principles and your understanding of what matters, the noise of the outside world loses its power. Compliments feel nice, but are not necessary. Criticism may be informative, but it no longer wounds you. You become less reactive to both praise and provocation, responding only when action is needed and letting the rest pass without disturbance. Ultimately, inner stability transforms your life. Situations that once caused anxiety, anger, or stress now feel manageable or even irrelevant. You gain consistency, clarity, and a calm confidence that others notice, even if they don't understand it. The world may still be unpredictable, but your emotional state becomes a choice, no longer a reflection of external chaos, but a manifestation of internal mastery.